statistics. It uses your proficiency bonus in several places. When you summon the Drake, you get to choose its dragon type listed in Draconic Essence trait. You can determine its colours. You can effectively determine how it looks. In combat, the Drake shares your initiative, but it takes the turn immediately after yours. It can move and use a reaction on its own, but the only action it can take on its turn is the dodge action unless you use a bonus action to command it to take another action. The actions can be one in its stat block or some other action. If you're incapacitated, the Drake can take any action of its choice, not just dodge. Drake remains until it reduces to 0, until you use this feature to summon the Drake again, or until you die. Anything the Drake was wearing or carrying is left behind when the Drake vanishes. Once you summon the Drake, you can't do it again until you finish a long rest, unless you expend a spell slot of first level or higher. So as you can see with the writing scheme of this, it's almost a carbon copy of what they did for the Primal Companion, and that's because that's generally the way you go nowadays with this stuff. Which I think is a good idea. Generally, what it has as the Drake Companion is it has Draconic Essence, which allows you to choose a damage type: acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison. You know, the generic effective dragon types, right? I associate them more with the evil side. I think all the good side have them as well, the metallics. Notably, they also get immunity to that damage, and that infuses their general attack. Their infused strike with that attack. Sorry, it's not their general attack. It's the alternate attack they can do. I'm just loading up now, so that's why I'm effectively rambling for a bit. In terms of health, though, it has the very same health scheme as the Primal Companion. It has 5 times your Ranger level. 5 plus 5 times your Ranger level. Its armor's pretty decent, and the speed being 40 is a bit abnormal. Most things get a speed of 30, but it makes sort of sense. They've got wings, they're going to use them. I don't know if it specifically mentions here that they actually have a flying speed, so maybe they don't have it at the start. I imagine they get it, though. Let's have a look. Infused Strike. So they have a reaction when another creature within 30 feet of the Drake that it can see hits a target with a weapon attack. The Drake infuses the strike with its essence, causing the target to take an additional 1d6 damage of the type determined by its essence. So effectively, when your friends or you go in for an attack, it infuses your weapon with its elemental power, and it does an extra, whatever, cold damage or something. Generally, as you can see, the Drake Companion is very, very similar to the Beast Master. In fact, I'm not going to check now, but I would imagine if you compare the Drake with the Beast of the Sea stat block, Beast of the Sky stat block, I imagine the only difference will be that the Beasts of the Sky will have flyby, and this will have the elemental essence ability. I believe that's the only difference. I could be wrong, but yeah. Overall, I'm fine with these abilities. It's the exact ability you expect from any subclass that's, whole shtick is that they have a companion with them. The first ability is always going to be you can have the companion with you. So it's not very, very surprising. And these extra draconic gifts, the other ability, is just narratively it makes sense for a dragon keeper to have draconic language. And thaumaturgy, I guess, is to represent more like the booming voice of a dragon, is my guess. 7th level, Bond of Fang and Scale. The bond you share with your Drake intensifies, protecting you and stoking the Drake's fury. When you summon your Drake, it grows wings on its back. So it does gain a flying speed, but it's later. and it's 40 feet. Okay, I guess that makes sense because it's you're summoning a drake more than you're summoning a dragon. I guess I've sort of forgotten about that distinction. It also becomes medium size. So what is it? Normally, I'm assuming small. Yeah, small. So before it's like kind of a shoulder dragon is how I'm seeing it, and then it becomes like a big dog size, maybe like a wolf size, maybe a bit bigger actually. It also gains the following benefits. The drake grows to medium size, reflecting a special bond. You can use the drake as a mount, and your size is medium. So maybe it's more like a dire wolf or like horse size, is what I'm seeing. Oh, you can't use the flying feature while you're riding it though. That's a shame. I don't know. I guess maybe giving stuff flying speed this early on is a bit powerful. The Drake's bite attack deals an additional 1d6 of the type chosen by the essence. Okay, that makes sense. Just keep the damage up so that it can keep up it with damage with everyone else, and you gain resistance to what the Draconic Essence has. That's cool. So your bond becomes closer, and so you gain the resistance they have. Well, the immunity they have becomes a resistance to you. Um, the bite attack gets an additional d6, which is interesting when you compare this one with the Beast Master, who doesn't get an increase in damage at this point. They get the non-magical, uh, like the ignore non-magical ability, and they get the extra ability of dash, help, disengage being a thing. Um, but this one just gets the additional d6 of damage, which makes me wonder if inherently their attacks are magical. Then I don't think there was anything that said they were. So maybe there'll be situations where, unless this makes it magical by the fact you're doing an additional magical damage, maybe there's a situation where the normal damage doesn't go through, but this does. I'd have to review the rules to see whether that's true or not. But yeah, I like this ability. I like the idea you can ride it. I'm glad you get that ability early on, because that's sort of in my head what I have is this person riding a dragon shooting people with a bow, or a person riding a dragon with a long lance that comes in and lances you. You know, a bit like how you see if you any of you have played Baldur's Gate 3, you see all the Githyanki riding red dragons. I kind of see it like that, but obviously not at the size of a red dragon, because they seem like adult red dragons. Drake's Breath. As an action, you can exhale a 30-foot cone of damaging breath, or cause your drake to inhale it. Exhale it, sorry. So you can breathe a breath, or your drake can breathe the breath. Okay, you choose the damage. Your choice doesn't have to match the Draconic Essence. Interesting. So they're very much going into the idea that your drake is effectively a drake of whatever it wants to be. And you reflect that as well, in the sense that you can do any breath you want. Now, that ability may come up, because if you're in situations where it's obvious, or you've previously dealt with a creature like that, and you know it has a certain resistance, or like additional effect that happens when it gets hit by it. So say you were dealing with a Froghemoth, which I think has like lightning vulnerability, in the sense it's different than it doing double damage. It's more like it has severe restrictions to what it can do if it gets hit by lightning. So if you knew that, you'd just go, okay, I exhale lightning breath at this thing. You get it once per long rest, or unless you expend a spell slot of 3rd level or higher. That makes sense because it's a powerful ability, so getting it back on a 1st level spell use would be a bit much. The damage increases to 10d6 when you reach 15th level. So I quite like this ability a lot more than I like a lot of abilities you get that are like a once per long rest and it does damage, because it's an AoE, and the AoE does a decent amount of damage. If you get two people in that, at 11th level, you're fine with spending your action hitting two people for 8d6 damage if they say fail a dexterity saving throw. You're still hitting for a total of 8d6 damage even if they both succeed. And that's if it only hits two people. Realistically, when you're using this breath, I see minimum it being 3. It's a 30-foot cone. That's huge. 15th level. Your bond to your Drake reaches the pinnacle of its power. When your Drake is summoned, you and the Drake gain the following benefits. The Drake's bite attack deals an extra 1d6, so at this point it would be doing a d6 piercing, a d6 of one elemental type, and then a d6 from... Sorry, 2d6 from the elemental type. So it'll be doing a total of 3d6 damage. That's pretty decent. It grows to large. When you ride the Drake, it no longer is prohibited from using its flying speed. When either you or the Drake take damage while you're within 30 feet of each other, you can use your reaction to give yourself or the Drake resistance to that instant of damage. You can use this reaction a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. What's interesting about this is it means that not only has it become like equivalent to, like, it's gotten to the point now where you'd look at it and you go, that's a dragon. Not like, oh, that's like a wyvern or a drake or something. Its damage has gone up, whereas the Beastmaster goes for more attacks and more like versatility. This one instead goes for just straight damage. Like, all of its abilities have a damage ability attached to them. This one goes, okay, your base damage with this thing, sure, it doesn't get multi-attack, but it does 3d6 when it doesn't attack. Being able to ride it and no longer have to be prohibited from flying just really gets into that image for me of like, yeah, I'm fucking flying around on my dragon, shooting a bow, it's coming in for attacks at the enemy. Realistically, when you're riding one of these, I feel like to get the best out of it when it becomes large is you probably want to be using some form of polearm. Realistically, you could use a weapon that doesn't have any form of reach, but if you did, I don't know, it ruins my immersion a bit to think that like you fly past, you fly into combat, it goes in for a bite, and then you also somehow can get a swing in. I guess if you go for the more like Final Fantasy-esque kind of idea with it, and so you have really large weapons, then maybe it's a different thing. Overall, I love the Drakewarden. I don't really have any comments about it. There's always the additional thing of wanting there to be a bit more out of combat things. It gives us one ability, arguably two, but not really. I just kind of wish there was another one, but that's just a minor gripe. I think looking at that, I can now see a reason why you would go Beastmaster instead of Drakewarden. Whereas before, I feel like you were just nerfing yourself. Now you're going for more like, I kind of want to use this more as like it goes out and does complicated things when I go Beastmaster, and this one I want to go just pure damage. I want damage, damage, damage. Both of them are pretty good. I think Drakewarden is slightly stronger, but that doesn't really matter when you're thinking of a character as long as it's not too ridiculously weak. I quite like both of them. What's the next one? Fey Wanderer. Fey Wanderer. So you seem to have some Boon of an Archfey, or like you've gotten some Fey related abilities, which is really interesting because I like the Fey a lot. More so, I like nature being strong because I've always felt like nature needs to be stronger in like D&D worlds because it feels like everything else is. Anyway, what's the first ability you get? You augment your weapon strikes with mind-scarring magic. Drawn from the gloomy hollows of the Feywild, when you hit a creature with a weapon, you can deal an extra 1d4 psychic damage to the target, which can take this extra damage only once per turn. Okay, so it's the extra damage type, but you get it earlier than you expect, but it's only once per turn. It goes up to a d6 when you hit level 11, but it's not a huge buff to your damage. But I guess early on it will make a difference. You also get access to a bunch of spells. First one we've seen that does this, which makes sense because it's more focused around magic than the other two were. But it's the abilities you expect a Fey to have. Misty Step, Charm Person, Dimension Door, Mislead. I think the only one here that I feel is a bit unfey-like is Dispel Magic, but it's very useful to have. All of these aren't bad spells, actually. Dimension Door is very useful for teleporting around, especially more long-range ones. Misty Step's good for the short range, and the fact it's a bonus action's very big. Charm Person's always useful to see because it allows you to, in narrative situations, it allows you to maybe get like a guard on your side briefly. There's a lot of narrative tools you can do with this, although you have to remember that they realize something's wrong as soon as it ends. And Mislead is a spell that keeps coming up. I don't really know what it does. You use your action to move you make a doppelganger, but you go invisible. So I'm sure you can do a load of tricks with that. You also get a gift. I like these little narrative things you can do. My personal favourite, having little horns. I kind of see them either being made out of roots or just being regular, but either way it looks really cool. Again, because I like the nature part of stuff. You also get otherworldly glamour. So you could make an argument that you get 3 abilities here, although the spells are maybe not considered an ability. Your Fey qualities give you a supernatural charm. As a result, when you make a charisma check, you gain a bonus to the check equal to your wisdom modifier. In addition, you gain proficiency in one of the following skills of your choice: deception, performance, persuasion, which makes sense because those 3 skills are probably what I'd attribute to a Fey. Deception, performance, persuasion, or at least the generic Fey, the fairy, like trickery, deceiving, like kind of Fey. I quite like this. I like the sort of subtle idea of, hey, you're not just charismatic, but you also have like a bunch of like worldly knowledge. Like you know what to do. You got the street smarts, and you can use that in addition to your charm to get what you want. I like all of these abilities. I think dreadful, dreadful, uh, dreadful strike feels a bit disappointing, but only because I just think of Hunter's Mark. And then when I think of Hunter's Mark and the damage you get from it, I then sort of understand why they haven't made this better than it is. I still think it could have been D4 for every instance of your attacks. But hey, I'm not a game designer. 7th level ability, Beguiling Twist. The magic of the Feywild guards your mind. You had advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened. That's pretty good early on. Charmed and frightened come up a lot, at least in our games. There was an instance where somebody was frightened so much that they just kept running for what felt like a mile. They had like 4 or 5 turns where they just were running. In addition, when you or a creature you can see within 120 feet of you succeeds on a saving throw against being charmed or frightened, you can use your reaction to force a different creature you can see within 120 feet of you to make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. If the save fails, the target is charmed or frightened by you, your choice, for 1 minute. The target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on a successful save. This is kind of cool because it's a two-way thing. You can have a situation where somebody in your party is a bard or some sort of other form of, maybe a wizard, some form of spellcaster that gets access to charmed and frightened abilities, and they could have tried to charm somebody, and you go, "Oh, that failed." Reaction, we'll try it on someone else. We'll at least get something out of this. There's also a situation where if you're dealing with people who try and frighten or charm you, you can go, "Oh, you failed against me. Well, let's see if you succeed." And then you can frighten or charm them. I quite like this little ability. It really fits into the whole Fey ability of like trickery, twisting stuff, especially with the whole idea of like the fact hags are Fey, and they're all about twisting what you want into something that it either works for them or is not like what you actually wanted. I like it. Fey reinforcements. At 11th level, the royal courts of the Feywild have blessed you with the assistance of Fey beings. You know, summon Fey. It doesn't count as against the number of ranger spells you know, and you can cast it without material components. You can also cast it once without spell slot, and you gain the ability to do so after a long rest. When you start casting the spell, you can modify it so it doesn't require concentration. If you do, the spell duration becomes 1 minute for that casting. So what's really interesting is this summon Fey ability. It's normally an action, but it's one of those new ones where like it summons a spirit, and you can sort of choose what kind of spirit it is, and it gains like an additional ability depending on what kind of spirit you choose. And this one goes, if you're in a situation where you can do it, you are not immediately in a combat, you can do this, and you can instead wait a minute to cast the spell, in which case you have this Fey for an hour. You don't care about concentration. It's just there for you, which is very cool. I like this little ability. I like the fact you just get at base it says you get a summon Fey ability. Summoning Fey is really cool. I love summoning. I'm never gonna say a wrong thing about summoning. So I love that ability. It doesn't fit into the whole trickery Fey sort of like idea, but it also kind of fits into the higher level you get, the more you're becoming like Arch Fey like, in the sense you have subordinates and stuff. Kind of like. Misty Wanderer. You can slip in and out of the Feywild to move in the blink of an eye. You can cast Misty Step without expending a spell slot. You can do so a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. In addition, whenever you cast Misty Step, you can bring one willing creature you can see within 5 feet of you. The creature teleports to an unoccupied space of your choice within 5 feet of your designated spot. So you get a group Misty Step, which is really cool because the whole point of this this sort of class is supposed to be like constantly moving around. You can never see me. This like illusions, trickery. Like, oh, you think I'm there? I'm not there. The fact that not only does this give you a load of teleportations, which are really useful, because if you teleport out of combat, you don't get hit by an attack of opportunity. But in addition, it allows you to bring someone else with you. So you can sort of bring maybe your whole backline if there's only one other person as the backline. And by the way, I do believe that this is better as a ranged combatant. It it means you can bring your friend with you, so that the backline can stay not being attacked. Overall, I really like all of these abilities, both their flavor and what you get out of them are both powerful, and I feel like really cool to be using, and also, flavorful. They make sense. I can't really complain about them. Yeah, I quite like it. It's a bit of a whiplash from Paladin, where I felt like you didn't get a lot, especially if you think about how both of these are half-casters, and you'd expect them to have similar quality level of abilities, and yet it very much feels like Ranger gets more from the being a half-caster, from their subclasses, even though they're a half-caster, than the Paladin does, interestingly enough. Gloom Stalker. Now this is one that came out in Xenophars, so it's not hugely old, but it's not one of the newer ones. First thing you get, spells. Disguise Self, Rope Trick, Fear, Greater Invisibility, and Seeming. Disguise Self, really good narrative tool. It's going to help you in many situations, many infiltration missions. Rope Trick, I don't particularly consider that good. I mean, it can get you onto roofs and stuff. I don't see it being that interesting, but you might get some use out of it. I'm not really a huge... I don't know a lot about it, really. Fear is useful. I've never cast this spell before, but I don't see a reason why I wouldn't. It's a cone ability that might fear some people. At least early on, that might be decent. Greater Invisibility is very, very good, especially for a ranger who's planning on being ranged. Because Greater Invisibility just gets rid of the whole thing of like, oh, but you can't attack because it'll disappear. And goes, nah, you can attack. You can just constantly have... They can constantly have disadvantage against you unless they have an alternate sight. I mean, you are getting it at 13th, which means it's going to be borderline useless on most bosses and probably a lot of elites. And you got Seeming, which is just like a group disguise self. It's not bad. It's very useful, especially, as I said, for disguise self as being a narrative tool. Except this time you can bring your friends with you. At 3rd level, you've mastered the art of the ambush. When you give yourself a bonus to your initiative, you give yourself a bonus to your initiative equal to your wisdom modifier, okay? So you're more likely to go first. At the start of your first turn of each combat, your walking speed is increased by 10, which lasts until the end of that turn. If you take an attack action on that turn, you make one additional weapon attack as part of that action. The attack hits, the target takes an additional 1d8 damage of your weapon's damage type. You can see very quickly here that its whole shtick here is go first, and your first turn is very explosive, which can be quite useful, because even getting into the later levels, this first turn could mean that you instantly kill an enemy, and any enemy you can kill means there's one less enemy that's attacking you. And that sounds weird, but I honestly believe that that's really useful. If you're fighting 5 goblins, and immediately before the fight happens you're fighting 4 goblins, you've effectively changed the challenge rating of this encounter. Because you've used an action, but they've been able to do absolutely nothing. So the fight becomes instantly a lot more easy. In addition, at 3rd level, as you can probably guess, I quite like that ability. I think if it doesn't get any if it doesn't get any scaling ability, I do worry that this will not scale particularly well. The extra movement speed will always be good, but the fact that you only get an extra d8 is going to feel a bit bad. It might scale, but at this point in time it doesn't feel like it will do very good if it stays as it is. Umbral Sight. You gain a dark vision out to a range of 60 feet. If you already have dark vision from your race, its range is increased by 30 feet. You're also adept at evading creatures that rely on dark vision. While in darkness, you are invisible to any creature that relies on dark vision to see you in that darkness. That is very, very useful, because at least early on, you're only getting this at 3rd level. There's very little that's going to have an alternate sight, unless it's stupidly obvious. Like if you're fighting a bunch of mole men, then they're going to have an alternate sight. But the fact that you become invisible is huge. I think this ability is very, very powerful. And overall, effectively changes how you're going to deal, like how you're going to fight. I've talked about this in other videos, but if your subclass fundamentally changes how you're going to fight, then it's a good subclass. And it has to do that 3rd level, because that's the whole point. You're going to the subclass and it's going to change how you fight. You had it with the Beastmaster and Drakewarden because it adds the companion and your interactions with said companion. Fey Wanderer didn't have it as much. I think the biggest change was the 15th, where you got group teleportation, but it was just a generally good class. But it wasn't great. I think that's the biggest thing it needs. Oh, I need to move that over. Oh well. Guess I won't be looking at Discord then. But yeah, I quite like that, because this one does fundamentally change how you fight. Because now you want to be in that darkness where normally you wouldn't really care about it, and you'd want to be in it because it gives you that invisibility, at least early on. Let's see, 7th level, Iron Mind. By 7th level, you've honed your ability to resist the mind-altering powers of your prey. You gain proficiency in wisdom saving throws, which is very useful because wisdom comes up a lot as a saving throw, especially as it says here when it's related to your mind. 1 second, I'm just going to move this over to here because I kind of can't not have the Discord in an alternate thing. Yeah, if you already have this proficiency, you gain proficiency in intelligence, charisma of your choice. Very useful. Having wisdom saving throws, as I said, it's like, I think it might be the 2nd most popular saving throw. Effectively, anything related to mind will probably be wisdom. Very few of them will be intelligence. And maybe only charm effects care about charisma. But yeah, I quite like this ability. It's a 7th level ability. It doesn't have a huge impact to it, but not a lot of them do. But it's generally quite good. 11th level. At 11th level, you learn to attack with such unexpected speed that you can turn a miss into another strike. Once on each of your turns, when you miss with a weapon attack, you can make another weapon attack as part of the same action. Very interesting, very useful. This effectively goes, we're going to make sure you get hits in. Like, we're not going to... It hasn't at this point given you an extra constant damage buff that you sort of were getting from the other ones, that with the Drakewarden and Beastmaster ones being your beast attacking. But this one goes, okay, we're not going to give you additional damage, except for that first turn. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to make it so you definitely hit. So that's... I quite like that approach. You've seen that approach very, very occasionally. And it doesn't really matter if you don't get a damage buff here, because realistically, you kind of have to think of every encounter with a ranger as, do they have a spell slot? Yes, they're probably casting Hunter's Mark. So that's just your additional little bit of damage anyway. At 15th level, you can dodge in unforeseen ways with wisps of supernatural shadow around you. When a creature makes an attack roll against you and doesn't have advantage on the roll, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on them. You can use this feature before you know the outcome of the attack roll. Now, personally, in all of the games I've done, the bit where it says you must use this feature before you know the outcome of the attack roll, it doesn't come up. Because in the way we do it, I guess we play a bit fast and loose when it comes to attacks. Because so a lot of the time they roll it and you're like, well, I wanted to use this, but there wasn't really an opportunity to say it before you rolled. So this probably doesn't come up to with our group unless specifically they look into that. I like this ability either way. I obviously it's a lot stronger if you ignore this final line, which probably will be done. But either way, this is just good. It's just I think the problem with it, actually, the more I think about it, is you're using your reaction for this when instead you could be using your reaction for. Oh, never mind. I was thinking of the rogue. It's kind of like the rogue ability where you half the damage, except it gives disadvantage. It might be a bit underwhelming for a 15th level ability. I think it's good. Yeah, it's a bit underwhelming as a final ability. Overall, I like the spells you get. I like the Dread Ambusher ability and the Umbral Sight ability because they properly change how you play, at least for the first round. The Iron Mind ability is very useful because Wisdom saving throws will come up a lot. Stalker's Flurry is an interesting take on increasing your damage output by instead just making it more likely for you to hit them. Yeah, I like that ability as well. Shadowy Dodge seems a bit weak, but it's possible that it's only a bit weak because this is a generally older subclass. I think I put this. I know it's going to sound weird because I was really hyping up the fact that it fundamentally changes how you play. I think I put this lower than the other three. We've got at a similar height at this point, with maybe Beastmaster being slightly lower because of it having a ability where half of it doesn't mean anything now. So I think at the top you got Drakewarden and Fey Wanderer. I'm not gonna. It's just a general ranking. I'm not gonna go really heavily into it. Then you've got Beastmaster under it, just a tiny bit under it, and then Gloomstalker. That's just a. There's a noticeable dip, but it's still good. Like I haven't found a bad subclass yet. Horizon Walker. Now I've played the Horizon Walker. This is the actual. This is the one that I have played. I didn't play it optimally because I'm pretty sure you're supposed to play it as a melee variant. I played it as ranged. First things first, you get access to some spells: protection from evil and good, Misty Step, haste, banishment, teleportation circle. My experience, all of these abilities are very, very useful and come up. Protection from evil and good especially comes up. Misty Step's always good as well. Haste is clutch a lot of the time. Haste is a very good ability, even at that later level. Banishment can just end encounters, as I said before. The first third level ability. You gain the ability to magically sense the presence of a planar portal. As an action, you detect the distance and direction to the closest planar portal within 1 mile of you. Once you've used this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. Now, I think this is a pretty weak ability because it implies that you have to be in a campaign where portals are a big thing, or at least a thing, for it to really work. And I think generally, I don't particularly like abilities that effectively say to the DM, if you don't add this, you're making my ability useless. Now, a lot of the time, the DM will add planar portals, so this will come up more than often. But in general, I don't like that framing of abilities. So I put this ability pretty low in my opinion. Plain old warrior. As a bonus action, choose one creature you can see within 30 feet of you. The next time you hit that creature on this turn with a weapon attack, all damage dealt by the attack becomes force damage, and the creature takes an additional 1d8 force damage. When you reach 11th level, it increases to 2d8. What's interesting about this is force damage is very, very, very good. It's one of the best damage types. And this one goes, all of your attack, not just this additional bit, all of your attack is force damage. This is the kind of ability that I expected to see as like a third level ability. You can see sort of why I was a bit disappointed with the D4, although notably this uses a bonus action. But if you also stack on a Hunter's Mark here from a previous bonus action, you have an extra d6 damage, and then all of that becomes force. It's very, very useful early on, and it's not bad later on, but early on it's very useful to get around non-magical resistances. Sorry, when I stop, I'm taking a sip of my drink. Ethereal Step. At 7th level, you learn to step through the ethereal plane. As a bonus, you cast Etherealness with this feature without expending a spell slot, but the spell ends at the end of the current turn. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. Now, Etherealness is probably what you expect. You effectively go Ghost from Danny Phantom. You can move through any object, but you can't end your turn, obviously, in an object, or else you'll be shot out. You ignore any effects, so if somebody put like spikes down, or like they've used the entangle spell to make difficult terrain or something. So it effectively goes, bonus action, I disappear, and you have no idea where I'm going to go unless you can see into the ethereal plane, and then I just reappear somewhere. But I can go through walls, and I don't care about anything that's on the ground. It's pretty useful. It is a one-time thing, but the ability to go, oh damn, I need to get out of here, I'm low health, I'm just going to have to sit the back line and start shooting now, because I can't stay in this fight. And just going, okay, I do my attacks, bonus action, I just disappear, and I go to the ethereal plane and I leave. It's like it's a panic button ability. And I love having panic button abilities, because I panic a lot. It's part of me. So I'm a big fan of this ability. Does a lot more than you expect from a 7th level. Distant Strike. At 11th level, you gain the ability to pass between the planes in a blink of an eye. When you take the attack action, you can teleport up to 10 feet before each attack to an unoccupied space you can see. If you attack at least 2 different creatures with this action, you can make 1 additional attack against a third creature. Very useful. Not only does it give you an extra attack if you're hitting multiple creatures, but also it gives you this nice little teleport, which means, and this is why I think it's kind of more melee based. You can go the dual blade strategy, which is the kind of one of the 2 main strategies of Ranger. You get your attack in, you get your extra attack in, but every time you're doing this, you can go, I get 1 attack on you, teleport to where someone else is. I get another attack on you, teleport to where someone else is. I do another attack on you. And because you haven't used your bonus action, you technically could go, and I do my bonus second attack on you, and I teleport away. Because all these teleports, what's interesting about the word teleport is it means that they don't get attacks of opportunity on you. It's kind of like you're just disengaging as well. You can go, I attack, I don't teleport, I attack again, I teleport this time, teleport 10 feet back, and then just leave. It's very, very useful. If this feels like the fundamental changing of your like how you fight, more so than any of the 3rd level abilities do. At 15th level, Your ability to move between planes enables you to slip through the planar boundaries to lessen the harm done to you during combat. When you take damage from an attack, you can use reaction to give yourself resistance to all of that attack's damage on this turn. Again, these abilities don't feel that good later on. I will say this one there is an exception in the sense that I look at this and go, okay, so if somebody's trying to focus me down, if I'm the only one in melee combat, I can go, okay, reaction, I'm resistant to all the damage. And every attack you're doing, well, I'm resistant to all that attack damage. It can be useful when you're dealing with something that has maybe a lot of attacks and all of them do the same damage. Notably, though, if you're dealing with, like, say, a dragon or something, you might have the claws doing slashing damage. But I reckon that bite does piercing damage. So you got to look out for people who have different types of damage types. Overall, third level abilities generally quite good. Get access to very decent spells, especially for combat. The detect portal ability is a bit of a dud. Ethereal Step, very, very, very cool. I wish I had more charges, but I understand why they didn't do it, because it might be too powerful, but I quite like it as a get out of jail free card. Distant Strike, taking an attack, allowing you to teleport. It fundamentally changes how you play your character. Having it where you can get an extra attack if you split up your damage also is a really cool way of doing it. Because it means now that you're incentivized to play probably differently than you normally play, because normally what you do is you want to focus all your attacks on one person, because you want to be eliminating potential threats to you. And Spectral Defense is kind of a bit disappointing. But I think what's interesting about these final, like, capstone abilities being a bit disappointing is it kind of allows you to feel a bit less guilty or less needing to continue to play a ranger. You can multi-class, and you don't feel like you're missing out on much. I kind of feel like maybe I talked a bit too fast through the additional ones, because I'm looking through this and I feel like it has a similar amount of subclasses, maybe slightly less amount of subclasses than the Paladin, but I've gone through these particularly quickly. Although Hunter's gonna, if I remember correctly, have 3 abilities for each of their things, so maybe it'll be a bit different. As I was saying, Hunter. At 3rd level, you get one of the following features, so you can choose one of them. Your tenacity can wear down the most potent foes. When you hit a creature with a weapon attack, the creature takes an additional 1d6 if it's below its hit point maximum. You can deal this extra damage only once per turn. As you can see with this ability, it has a restriction. The restriction isn't that big. It effectively just says if you're not the first person to hit this person, like in the combat, then you get this additional ability. Especially when you get multi-attack, and you can just go, okay, well, my first attack did the additional damage. Like, the first attack did the regular damage, and my second attack just gets the extra damage. And the other one had a very similar ability, and it was newer, and it only did a d4, and it was only once per turn. To me, I felt like they've nerfed that one a bit too much. Anyway, we're talking about the Hunter, not the other ones. So yeah, that's Colossus Slayer. Then there's Giant Killer. When a larger creature within 5 feet of you hits or misses you with an attack, you can use your reaction to attack that creature immediately after its attack, providing that you can see the creature. So this one has a much larger restriction, pardon the pun, but the ability of getting an extra attack, especially early on, is pretty huge. Because you've effectively, if you've not gone dual wielding, you've doubled the amount of attacks you get. So that's pretty decent. I wonder how often, at least early on, you're dealing with, or even later on, how often you're actually dealing with larger creatures. a lot of the elite enemies will probably be on the larger side, or could be on the larger side. I'm just basing this on my experience, where a lot of the time you're dealing with humanoid fat dudes as your main creatures, and as your main, like, chaff, your main dudes. Whether that's zombies, whether it's bandits, whether it's, like elemental cultists or something. And they're not large, they're medium. Because I think on average, I think on average everybody really is medium except for the Minotaur you can play in Theros, and I think maybe is large, but even then I don't think so. It might have some features from being large without being large. So you'd be maybe dealing with elites, like actual elementals, or you know, undead like ogres, or possibly maybe just a regular ogre in the bandit sense. Maybe you get an extra attack on. I think this one's a bit more restrictive, and I think generally I'd probably take Colossus Slayer, but Giant Slayer's not bad. And then there's Horde Breaker. Once on each of your turns, when you make a weapon attack, you can make another weapon attack with the same weapon against a different creature that is within 5 feet of the original target and within the range of your weapon. Horde Breaker feels like, unless I'm misunderstanding how weapon attack is, and it for some reason doesn't work on bows, it feels more like the bow one. I understand the use, it can also be used in, a situation where you're surrounded, but you don't have to jump through many hoops to get the bow one to do an additional attack on a different enemy that they can see within range. Overall, I'd probably be choosing from Colossus Slayer or Horde Breaker unless I had a real narrative reason why I'd be a Giant Slayer. Like, literally, maybe my like village was overrun by giants or something like that. Other than that, yeah, I'd probably just be picking those other two because they just seem like you can use them more, and they're not necessarily that much weaker than Giant Killer, although it does scale better than Giant Killer. No, sorry, Giant Killer scales better than the others. Even with that restriction, I don't know how much you're going to get out of it. I do notice that at 3rd level, because this one's a bit of a older class, it's one of the oldest, it doesn't get access to like an additional ability in addition to its base ability. And it sort of does like a very weak changing of how you'd play, in the sense that if you have Horde Breaker, you'd want to be playing, you'd be in situations where you want to actually be aggroing or going into combat range of multiple enemies. Whereas if you were going Colossus Slayer, you wouldn't really care about that. You'd probably want to be wearing down a single foe. And with Giant Killer, you'd obviously be focusing larger creatures. But it's not like a full like changing of how you'd play the class, and that's why I'm not giving it 100%. Like, it changes how you play the class, like Monica. At 7th level, you're getting one of the following features of your choice: Escape the Horde. Opportunity attacks against you are made with disadvantage. I don't like these abilities. I would prefer if it was just a disengage, because there's still a good chance they hit a lot of the time. At least a lot of the time, when I'm in when I'm in campaigns, a lot of the enemies are glass cannons, where they can hit you reliably, and when they hit you, they do a decent amount of damage, but they just don't have the health. I feel like in those situations, they probably are gonna hit you even if they have disadvantage. Sure, it's gonna make it less likely, but it doesn't feel as good. I feel like a lot of them could be disengaged and it wouldn't matter. Multi-attack defense. When a creature hits you with an attack, you gain a +4 bonus to AC against all subsequent attacks made by that creature for the rest of the turn. Very, very interesting attack. Ability, because I haven't seen things like this ever really before. So it's specifically an anti-boss ability, really. Because I guess elites and stuff start getting multi-attack later. But I quite like it. It gives you a very weak shield, but you have to be hit first. But what I like about this is it sort of it doesn't guarantee, but it makes it very unlikely that if they get a hit on you, they get another hit on you, which I think is really interesting. I think, giving a quick overview of the defensive tactics at this point, I'm picking this one over Escape the Hordes, but that's just personally me. Steel Will, your advantage on saving throws against being frightened. I'm not taking that one. I'm probably either taking Escape the Horde or multi-attack defense. The reason I'm not taking Steel Will is because having one thing that you just have advantage against doesn't feel that good. Because how often is frightened going to come up? It's one condition that comes up. I don't think that's very useful. Whereas multi-attack defense will come up a decent amount, especially the higher levels you get up. And Escape the Horde, there'll be situations it comes up. Technically, in every combat, you could potentially be using this. Overall, I don't mind these abilities. I think you can obviously see that they are older abilities, because I feel like if this was made nowadays, Escape the Horde would say you can bonus action disengage. Multi-attack defense would say you gain a plus, probably a plus 10 bonus. It'd be like a shield. But nah, let's be more realistic. It'd probably say maybe like a plus 5 AC, but it would say plus 5 AC until the end of your until the start of your next turn. So it'd be a constant. And then Steel Will would say you become immune to frightened and charmed. If they were made nowadays. Overall, I think multi-attack defense is the best one. I think Escape the Horde is fine. '11th level, you gain multi-attack. But not multi-attack as in you get an extra attack, but that's just the name of the ability, just so it doesn't confuse anyone. Because I got a bit confused there. 11th level, you gain one of the following features. Volley. You can use your action to make a ranged attack against any number of creatures within 10 feet of a point you can see within your weapon range. You must have ammunition for each target as normal, and you make a separate attack roll for each target. So you get a kind of 10 feet AoE, but it's just your basic attack, which is very interesting, because that might be more powerful than any AoE you can get at that point, because your weapon attack at this point probably is magically enhanced in some capacity. Also, one of them probably has your hunter's mark on. You get an additional little bit on them as well. That's pretty cool. I like that. I like giving martial classes pseudo spells, because it feels like it's one of the few ways you're actually able to get make them more powerful. At least it's one I suggest a lot of the time for fighter, in the sense that I suggest that they give Battle Master features just as a base fighter ability, and they're kind of like spells, except used in martial combat. Whirlwind attack. You can use your action to make a melee attack against any number of creatures within 5 feet of you, with a separate attack roll for each target. So this one's a bit more clear cut. Are you more ranged focused? Are you more melee focused? If you're more ranged, you take volley. If you're more melee, you take whirlwind attack. I think both of the abilities are good. I think generally volley's probably better, because you get a lot more. You don't have to jump through as many hoops, because if you have a longbow, for example, your range is so huge. Because it doesn't say short range. It says range. And the range of a a longbow. It's something like 360 feet or something. It's huge. And so you get a 360 feet range AoE. Whereas Whirlwind Attack, you have to be in a situation where you're surrounded. You can't just pick and choose like an area that, oh, there's a bunch of archers over here in a tower trying to shoot us. I choose that bit and I volley and hit all of them. You have to set yourself into a position where you're surrounded by people. And obviously it'll be easier for the melee person to do that, but I think generally the volley's stronger. Just because I feel like generally ranged might be stronger than melee. But I think both the abilities are quite good. At 15th level, you get Superior Hunter's Defense. You gain one of the following abilities. You gain Evasion. Evasion is when you are subjected to an effect that allows you to make a dex save, which I think is the most popular saving throw. To take half damage. You instead take no damage if you succeed and only half if you fail. It's a rogue feature that they get really early on. I think like level 6 or 7. But you getting access to that is very, very good. It's a good feature, even if you're getting it later on. Stand Against the Tide. When a hostile creature misses you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to force that creature to repeat the same attack against another creature other than itself of your choice. It's going to come up less, but the idea that you can go reaction, I make this ogre hit his goblin friend, probably kills the goblin friend. I like the redirection angle. I think I get a lot of fun out of that ability. Uncanny Dodge. When an attacker that you can see hits you with an attack, you can use a reaction to half the damage attacks damage against you. So again, that's another rogue feature. So at 15th level, you get one of two rogue features that are very big rogue features that you're not sad at getting at this point. I'm seeing a theme here where 15th level abilities and rangers include one that will half the damage when you get hit. And I don't like that ability. I don't think it's powerful enough for here. As I said before, rogues get it really early on, and their hit die isn't smaller than a ranger's. I think I really like the idea of Stand Against the Tide. I don't know if it's the most powerful one there, but I think it's the most fun. I think Evasion and Uncanny Dodge aren't bad choices, but I would take Stand Against the Tide. In general, for hunters, for the hunter subclass, I like this idea, this whole shtick they're going with, which is choose what you want. It allows for loads and loads of different combinations where you could play a hunter twice and you could play it in a completely different way because of you just chosen a different set of abilities. I think generally they're okay balance wise. I think there's always one that feels a lot weaker than the others, but they're not horrendously weaker. Like, I'm not going to be like, well, you've just made yourself so weak by taking it. And having two options that are like decently comparable to each other is still pretty good. And all of them are pretty fun abilities. Like, Stand Against the Tide I think is really fun. I think Volley and Whirlwind Attack are really fun. I think multi-attack defense is something I don't think I've ever seen before, and I really like its shtick. And Hordebreaker and Colossus Slayer are okay. I think generally that the biggest problem with this is just that it's an older class. And so a lot of its abilities that either are worded in a way that makes it easier to use later on with later subclasses, or would just have more damage or more effect if they were made nowadays. Really hurt it because you feel like you probably will notice that you are less convenient and doing less damage than the people who are using newer classes. But I will say, it's not so weak that I feel like you will like feel like you're doing nothing. I'll say that it's still, you can still take it and you'll still feel, if you like the way it goes, you'll still have a load of fun. I just have to bring up that it is a weaker Monster Slayer. Jesus, I'm going through these quicker than I normally do. And I don't think it's for lack of having things to talk about. I just think maybe it's got less subclasses than the average. It's got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8, and this has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it has 2 less than the Ranger, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You know, it's on the lower number count, but still, I think I'm going through these pretty quickly. On to the next one, Monster Slayer. The Monster Slayer is one of the ones that gets access to some spells. It gets access to a pretty decent selection, very similar actually to the Horizon Walker, because it gets protection from evil and good, which is really, really good. Banishment, which is also very, very good. But in addition, it gets Zone of Truth, which can be very good out of combat narrative stuff. Magic Circle, which I didn't think would come up much, but it does come up a decent amount. Hold Monster's not bad, although at that level, I feel like everyone's breaking your DC, unless they specifically are bad at the thing. But I guess that's just you have to use it strategically. At 3rd level, you gain Hunter's Sense. You gain the ability to peer at a creature and magically discern how best to hunt it. As an action, choose one creature you can see within 60 feet of you. You immediately learn whether that creature has any damage, immunities, resistances, or vulnerabilities, and what they are. If the creature is hidden from divination magic, you sense that it has no damage, immunities, resistances, or invulnerabilities. You gain this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier. You gain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. Now, interestingly about this ability is it reminds me of a story. It reminds me of something I thought of the other day. I was playing another sort of TTRPG called Lancer, and one of the people I was playing with was playing a hacking mech. And the hacking mech's whole shtick was what it could do is if it hacks you, it could learn all of your information. So effectively, the DM just allowed the person who was hacking to look at the character sheet. And I thought that was really helpful and really fun to see, especially when there was like, oh god, it's got this, you know. So I think that you get a very similar. I feel like I'd get a very similar sense when I use hunt. Very similar sense, very similar like feeling if I used Hunter's Sense in D&D, because it's just going, hey guys, don't hit them with X, don't hit them with Y, and occasionally, hey, you've got to hit them with this. I think that would be really cool, and it really affects the idea of like, I have all this knowledge that I've gained over the years on how to hunt certain monsters. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this ability. It does use an action, which is a bit of a shame. It is a powerful ability, but there's just a part of me that wishes it was a bonus action instead. But that's just me wanting it to be a bit more powerful, really. That's just me being kind of selfish, if anything. Slayer's Prey. Starting at 3rd level, you can focus your ire on one foe, increasing the harm you inflict on it. As a bonus action, you designate one creature you can see within 60 feet of you as the target of this feature. The first time each turn that you hit a creature with a weapon attack, it takes an additional 1d6 damage from that weapon. The benefit lasts until you finish a short rest or long rest. It ends early if you designate a different creature. What's interesting about this ability is it's effectively a Hunter's Mark. But it's a Hunter's Mark that you also could cast Hunter's Mark on the creature. I quite like this ability. As you can see again, like, sure, this is using a bonus action, but extra D6. A D6, it's an extra 1 damage on average than a D4, but this is an older class. And it only takes a bonus action to get more damage than that Fey one. I know it seems like I'm harping on about that Fey Ranger. It's gone against the convention that you normally see with subclasses, where the damage ability is at least a D6. Getting back on track on the Monster Slayer, I'm pretty positive on it with these 3rd level abilities. Protection from Evil and Good and all this other spells are just very, very useful spells in general. Hunter's Sense seems like it'll be a very, very fun class feature to use. Slayer's Praise is that little bit of extra damage. It's like you have 2 Hunter's Marks and stuff. You do have to go through a bit to get this and a Hunter's Mark on. But in a situation where you're dealing with something really tanky, the fact that you can, at 3rd level, go, I attack with an extra 2d6 damage every time. And the fact that also Slayer's Prey doesn't go, you concentrate on the thing is also very decent. At 7th level, you get Supernatural Defense. At 7th level, you gain extra resilience against your prey's assault on your mind and body. Whenever the target of your Slayer's Prey forces you to make a saving throw, and whenever you make an ability check to escape that target's grapple, add a d6. So what I really, really like about Monster Hunter is it seems to be becoming, you get a free Hunter's Mark, and the Hunter's Mark buffs you against that creature. So you're learning knowledge about it, and now you're more resilient against it. Having that extra d6 is huge. It's better than a Bless on you. A Bless is just an extra d4. This is an extra d6. That's pretty good. On average, that's giving you an extra 4 to all of your rolls. That can be huge, especially at 7th level. Even later, actually. That's a pretty good ability, especially for a 7th level ability. At 11th level, you gain the ability to thwart someone else's magic. Whenever you see a creature casting a spell, or teleporting within 60 feet of you, you can use your reaction to try and magically foil it. The creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC, or its spell or teleport fails and is wasted. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short rest or a long rest. I really, really like this, especially because in the campaign I'm in right now, a lot of creatures, I say a lot of creatures, the creatures we're dealing with at the moment seem to be quite partial to teleportation, and it can be quite annoying because you don't know how you deal with that. Because teleportation is kind of like a get out of jail free card because you don't get attack of opportunities on them, so there's nothing you can do once it's their turn. Having an ability that allows you to shut off teleportations, admittedly, it's only if they're teleporting within 60 feet of you, but 60 feet is a huge area, and Misty Step teleports them back 30 feet from you, and you go, make a succeed on a wisdom save, or your teleport doesn't work. I am a bit annoyed that it doesn't have this one line of text that newer stuff has, which is, once you succeed using this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long or short rest. I just like that extra little ability so that this never doesn't get any use out of it. Because I can see a situation where it's like, oh, you're casting a spell on me? Make a wisdom saving throw. Oh, you succeeded. I can't use this feature again. And you just feel sad. Whereas it feels to me a little bit better when it goes, oh, you're casting a spell on me? Succeed in a saving throw. Oh, you succeeded? Oh, well. Get the spell goes through. And then next time I can go, oh, you cast a spell? Succeed in a wisdom save. And maybe that time it fails. Slayer's Counter. At 15th level, you gain the ability to counterattack when your prey tries to sabotage you. If the target of your Slayer's prey forces you to make a saving throw, you can use your reaction to make one weapon attack against the quarry. You make this attack immediately before making the saving throw. If the attack hits, your save automatically succeeds in addition to the attack's normal effect. I really like that. The idea that you effectively hit them and you go, well, you were trying to hit me, but now you can't hit me. Like, you try to make me do a saving throw to fall over or to be charmed or to be feared, and I just went no, and I got damage on you, which could waste the whole turn. I'm thinking like you're fighting a dragon. The dragon goes to use its breath weapon. You go, okay, as a reaction I hit it. You turn off the breath weapon and stop so much damage that would have hit you and your friends. That's huge. This is a 15th level ability that I've seen that's actually felt like it's been a 15th level ability. I think the only other one that had that sort of feel, it's effectively been everyone that hasn't been as a reaction, like half the damage. Like this one, the Drakewarden one felt like it was an additional, it was a 15th level ability because it got an additional thing to it. As did the Beast Master one because of the sharing spell thing. Effectively, this one felt like a 15th level ability mainly because it wasn't as a reaction you can half the damage. So I'm kind of a big fan of this. I think in general, Monster Slayer, I've been a big fan of it. 3rd level abilities are really cool and interesting. 7th level ability is pretty good for a 7th level ability. You don't get that kind of stuff normally. 11th level ability is very, very interesting. The idea that you can potentially turn off a teleport is really interesting. And 15th level ability feels like a 15th level ability. This is a very, very cool subclass that obviously focuses on choosing an enemy and going, I want this enemy to unexist. And you just focus purely on that, and it hopefully focuses just on you, and you're really good at dealing with it. God, normally these go for 2 hours, but we're on an hour and a half, and it's one to the final one. It's honestly just because I think Ranger doesn't have as many subclasses as the other ones we've been doing. Definitely not as many as Paladin and Monk had. This one is Swarmkeeper. Its 3rd level ability is a swarm of intangible nature spirits have bonded itself to you and can assist you in battle. While you're alive, the spirits remain in your space, crawling on you or flying and skittering around you within your space. You determine its appearance or generally its appearance by rolling on the swarm appearance table. I like that they have this because it's just good for general ideas. I always seem to picture them, because it says swarm, as insects, but I like the idea of it being potentially maybe like birds. Tiny birds is kind of cool, like little sparrows or robins would be interesting. Generally though, I can see pixies as well. Generally, if I'm making one of these, I'm probably going to have it as insects, but you know, teach their own. I like that they have this as potential other ways you can do it other than insects. Once on each of your turns, you can use the swarm to assist you in one of the following ways. Immediately after you attack attack the creature with an attack. The attack's target takes 1d6 piercing damage from the swarm. I don't know if this is notable in most contexts, but I think technically with how this is worded, it's 2 instances of damage. Which it means maybe if they're concentrating on something, you get 2 chances of knocking them out of concentration. I would have to look in more detail to see if that's actually how it works. but the way I'm reading it, it seems to be the attacker's target must succeed on a strength saving throw against your spell save DC or be moved by the swarm up to 15 feet horizontally in a direction of your choice. Okay, so you can move them as well, which is quite interesting if either you want to get out of combat, or, as I've said with any sort of form of pushing abilities, being able to push people off edges, into lava, into spikes, even into difficult terrain is like huge. If you push them 15 feet into difficult terrain, that probably means they're spending their whole turn, if they don't dash, getting out of the difficult terrain. Or you are moved by the swarm 5 feet horizontally in the direction of your choice. Notably about this ability again is forced movement doesn't give you opportunity attacks. And I believe that this is technically forced movement. So this could be an easy way of getting out of like melee range of somebody. Now, admittedly, it's only 5 feet, so they could immediately get close to you. But if you haven't used your movement, you could technically then do 30 feet backwards. You also get access to Swarmkeeper magics. You get access to a spell list that you get for free without having to concentrate on them. First off, you gain Mage Hand. Very useful. I guess the narrative behind that is that you're sending your swarm to, yeah, as it says there, takes the form of swarming nature spirits. I like that little flavour bit in there. I always like when they add like little flavourful things that technically don't add anything to it, but it gets you more in the idea of what your subclass is about. Gain access to Fairy Fire, which makes sense narratively because these are nature spirits, which mostly are associated with the Fey. Web's pretty interesting. It's quite useful to, at least early on, keep a load of enemies locked in one place, and also the combo of then immediately casting Fireball and getting that extra little bit of damage isn't bad. Gaseous Form can be useful to get you out of. I feel like it's more used in narrative situations to get you out of traps or to get you into rooms that you normally wouldn't expect. The problem with Gaseous Form is your fly speed is only 10 feet, so you're pretty slow. But I can see some uses behind it. Arcane Eye, I've never used it. But the idea that you can sort of make a hovering eye that can watch over something could be used in, like, maybe if you're doing an investigation and you're trying to case a joint, or maybe you want to have that extra bit of protection while your friends are doing something really big. So you have like you have an eye in a really like far away that well, not far away, but maybe behind a corner that gives you a heads up, like maybe a turn in game before you'd normally get it. An Insect Plague is pretty decent. It's an AoE. It's not as powerful as you'd expect from an AoE at 5th level, but the fact that while it's there, the area is lightly obscured, and it's difficult terrain, sort of makes up for it. The fact it does piercing damage as well, which I immediately thought, with this being called Insect Plague and what I thought Plague would be, I thought it'd do poison damage, and poison damage isn't great. But the fact it doesn't like piercing damage, that's not bad. And it's a constant. 10 minutes is a pretty long time to have a concentration as well. These spells in general aren't bad. I think Fairy Fire and Web I've gotten use out of. I think Gaseous Form is a bit. I don't know how much you get use out of Gaseous Form, but Arcane Eye I could see some uses in, and Insect Plague isn't bad. In general, the third level features, they're not bad. They don't incredibly excite me. I like the fact you get an additional bit of damage. Again, notably, if you compare it to the Fey that you only got a D4, this one gets a D6. The fact that you've got a lot of uses with it and it isn't just damage is pretty handy as well. And the spells aren't bad. At 7th level, Writhing Tide. You can condense part of your swarm into a focused mass that lifts you up. As a bonus action, you gain a flying speed of 10 feet and can hover. The effects last for 1 minute or until you are incapacitated. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain them on a long rest. I don't know about this ability, because it is flying speed, which is generally quite useful, but it's only 10 feet. Which to me isn't huge. The fact that you activate this and it's just like you have this flying speed for the minute, which is that's not bad. But I just generally feel like 10 feet of flying speed, if you're above, like if you've gone up at all, then you can't use your walking speed anymore. So it's effectively gone. You spent a bonus action to have your speed knocked by 20 feet. I'm sure there's ways that if you're I'm not going to say metagamer, but if you're smart using it, you can have it where you can get out of range of people's attacks, so they have to use range by going up like 10 feet, or maybe over 2 turns going up by 20 feet. But generally this ability, I don't feel like it had to be 10 feet. If it said flying speed equal to your movement speed, I don't think it'd be too powerful. I don't think giving somebody a flying speed, but you have to activate it as a bonus action, would have been that bad. I think generally I'm a bit underwhelmed by this ability, but I'm not it's not horrendous. And again, 7th level abilities are never normally that big. Anyway. Mighty Swarm. Your gathering swarm grows mightier in the following ways. The damage increases from a d6 to a d8, which isn't bad. It's not incredible, but this is little extra damage that you don't normally expect it. Like, you're not doing much to get this, so you don't feel too bad. If they fail the saving throw being moved, they also get knocked prone, that's pretty decent, because knocking someone prone means that your friends, if they get their turn before his, can just all hit them with advantage attacks if they're in melee. And also it does mean that they're sacrificing half their movement. Both of those are like not small abilities to get, especially just as an additional effect casually on your turn. When you are moved by Gathering Swarm, it gives you half cover until the start of your next turn. That is a huge bonus to that ability, because now, in addition to getting the movement, you also give yourself AC bonuses and I think it's like for half cover it's like a +2 or something. Towards definitely ranged attacks, and I'm pretty sure melee attacks, but I'd have to look up half cover again in the rules to see if I'm within 5 feet of you, whether they matter. I've got a sneaking suspicion they don't matter when you're within 5 feet, but I could be wrong. Overall, this ability is pretty interesting. You get the damage scaling that you kind of expect, because the ability is sort of falling off at this point. You gain a pretty significant change to your saving throw ability, especially since you can do this over and over again, and it doesn't like have a number of uses. The fact that now it can push them and knock them prone over and over again is very useful. And the movement on the buff to the movement of Gathering Swarm, to me, changes that ability from being an occasional ability to being a pretty often ability now. I think what's interesting about this 11th level ability is I feel like generally the strongest ability hasn't got a huge buff, and the weakest ability got a huge buff. And so like they've effectively gone and balanced out the 3 abilities a bit more. I still think the damage one is what you'll get the most out of, but the others you could use a lot more now. Swarming Dispersal. You can just discorporate into your swarm, avoiding danger. When you take damage, you can use your reaction to give yourself resistance to that damage. You vanish into the swarm and then teleport to an unoccupied space that you can see within 30 feet, where you reappear with a swarm. Use this equal to your proficiency bonus. So, as you could probably expect by the way I changed my voice at the halfway through that, I'm not a big fan of any ability that's. I'm not a big fan of the Ranger, all of the Rangers, or at least a lot of the Rangers, getting bonus action resistance to the damage as one of their abilities. This one's a bit notable because it gets an additional thing with it, which bumps it up a bit more than I'd usually give. In general, it's not a bad ability. The fact you're getting that teleport means that you get out of danger and you're probably not getting hit by another ability. And it kind of means that if they do decide to hit you, well, you have resistance to that damage, if assuming that damage is the same kind. Um, so even if you do get hit, there's a good chance you take half damage. I think this is making it more with the additional feature. Makes this more of a 15th level ability, but it's supposed to be your capstone ability. Like, it's supposed to be this final ability that makes your class. And I just feel like, I know it's 5 levels below what the paladin gets, but I think honestly both of them don't feel like this powerful feature. I think back to like the Way of Mercy monk that we looked at previously, where it had an 11th level ability, or at least it wasn't its capstone, but it was the one before it. It might have been 13th. And it effectively went, that feature that you've been using constantly since level 3, you can now, if you spend a key point to do this addition, to do the flurry of blows, you just get those features on all your attacks. And that to me felt like a capstone ability, even though that one wasn't a capstone ability. Because what it did was it went, okay, you know, you use this feature constantly, and now because you have such mastery over it, you can use it. You can use it without having to spend a key point specifically on it, and that's the kind of thing I expect from a capstone feature, that you've mastered the ability so much that you get this. It reflects how powerful you are in in your mastery of it. Overall, with Swarmkeeper though, I love the narrative behind it. I love the little extra ability you get, and the fact that it doesn't take anything, and there's options for it as well. The spells are okay. I think me personally, I'd find less use out of Arcane Eye and Gaseous Form as I feel like maybe some other people might be able to get. So I rate those a bit low. With the Writhing Tide is an interesting ability that I feel like was just made too weak because they were scared about giving flying speed so early, and because of that, I think it's really gotten less useful, in my opinion. I think Mighty Swarm is okay. I like the fact that it buffs the two weaker ones to make them viable to be used, while still not making the damage one feel too bad. And then the Swarming Dispersal is another one of the long list of, I feel like about half of the subclasses that just give you reaction resistance to stuff. And frankly, I just got sick of them. How does it feel like you're unique to your class when you could be playing with another level 15 ranger and they effectively have the same ability? And that's their big ability, like yours is the big ability. Maybe I'm just getting a bit like sick of them, but I just don't rate anything with that as highly as I would normally. In general, for Ranger, um, I feel like the ranking for me is Beastmaster and Drakewarden are very high up there, with Drakewarden taking it slightly, but only really slightly. Same place as Drakewarden is probably the Fey Wanderer. I think that one's very good. I think Gloom Stalker is under Beastmaster as being taking like that third space, with Fey Wanderer and Drakewarden being like joint first, Beastmaster being like close second, Gloomstalker being third. I think Horizon Walker probably is probably up there with Drakewarden and Fey Wanderer, so probably in that sort of the top tier. I think Hunter, although being weaker than the others, I think in terms of abilities is probably there in the top tier as well. Monster Slayer was very, very cool. I'd probably put that in the top tier. And Swarmkeeper was okay. I'd probably put it in the same sort of tier as maybe slightly under Beastmaster. So I think you've got like your A classes, your A grading ones, which are probably Drakewarden, Fey Wanderer, Horizon Walker, Hunter, and Monster Slayer. And then you've got your Bs, which are probably Beastmaster, and then C, which is Stormkeeper, and then probably a D, which is Gloomstalker. I think narratively Gloomstalker is quite cool. I think it falls down compared to the rest of them. But I will say, all of them to me do, on average, do a lot better than Paladin in terms of the subclass. And the reason I compare the two is because they're both half-casters that care about martial fighting, right? The only other casters are Warlock, which you could argue, although a lot of people play it as like a melee fighter, it's supposed to be, well, at least majority of the time, it's played as a ranged spellcaster. An Artificer, which again is mostly played as a ranged like spellcaster. And so the closest I feel like to Ranger is Paladin. And I feel like Paladin really disappointed me. I think Glory was okay, and then there was a couple of others that were okay, but generally they were a bit disappointing, especially with the fact that they had a capstone feature that was level 20, and some of them just weren't good. Whereas this one, I feel like generally that even the one I consider the quote unquote worst, my least favourite, the Gloomstalker, I still think is really good. Like, I would play a Gloomstalker, and I have had ideas for Gloomstalkers before. Because it's just really cool to have this idea of, like, not necessarily like a sniper in the sense of, like, what they do in the army, but a sniper in the sense of, like, somebody who sits down in a place for long periods of time waiting for that shot. You know, that is sort of like what a hunter would do, but the idea that the Gloomstalker adds to that in, like, the guy like crouching with his bow drawn with camouflage over himself, and goes, okay, but what if that person had very slight hints of like shadow magic, and so that camouflage isn't just a physical thing, but also literally like the shadows are covering them. And the whole idea behind it, where it's like the first turn really matters, is a cool idea. I think the Assassin Rogue, which will be the next one that we review next week. The Rogue in general we'll be reviewing next week. The Rogue subclasses, I think, has a similar one in that. But I just feel like if you look at its abilities, I think it falls by the wayside when it have, like, for example, there's this ability here, you get an extra D8 damage, and then you look at some of the other abilities we get, even the Fey one. In 2 turns on average, you're doing more damage than that Gloomstalker one is. Now, sure, that doesn't feel too bad when you're early level, but it never gets another bonus to its damage passively. It doesn't increase in every level, and so when that hits D6, you're doing a lot more damage than the Gloomstalker over 2 turns. You're almost doing as much damage in 1 turn. On average, you're only doing 1 less damage. So I just feel like maybe it's a symptom of it being an older subclass without having any improvements to it. But I feel like it just doesn't scale. like Hunter that technically came out before it has a damage buff ability you can get. That the only requirement is having them being less than maximum health, which is such an easy requirement to get. Arguably early on, it's like the Gloomstalker gets this damage first turn, and then the Hunter gets this damage every other turn, and it's the same damage. So yeah, that's my general review of Ranger. I'm pretty happy with all of the Ranger subclasses. I went away from Paladin being pretty disappointed. I went away from Monk being really happy. I've gone away from Ranger with a similar feeling. That kind of feeling where I'm like, I need to go ask my DM for a bunch of backup characters so that I can stat out some of these guys and ideas I've had for them. So yeah, that'll be all. It's a shorter stream this time around because there's less subclasses. But I hope you've liked it. I've been JD Moss. Thank you for watching.